Nomad Airsoft contacted me and asked if I would review one of the new Arcturus C.A.T series. He had the Arcturus C.A.T-06 on hand, which is the versatile polymer body, shorter barrel model. It still has the split gearbox and all the other cool features that go along with that. He asked if I would review it. He had one on hand, threw it my way, and I'm like, of course. I love Arcturus, they're great guns, they've never disappointed me, and I'm happy to check it out. So we're going to be looking at this today. Real quick, before we get into the gun too much, we're going to talk about everything it comes with, because it comes with quite a lot. This one came with a single mid-capacity magazine. This can be flipped from either 30 or 130 rounds. It has a follower that goes a little out the top to feed most, if not all, the BBs. A nice metal flash hider. Generally, the birdcage flash hider these come with, the orange plastic one, is just screwed on and held in place with a grub screw. So these are pretty easy to install. A Deans to Tamiya adapter. The gun already comes with the Deans connector, so if you're old school or haven't quite caught up with the times, you have an adapter for your old Tamiya batteries. A load of stickers, a lot of stickers, a whole sheet of stickers, your obligatory cleaning rod, a refrigerator magnet for Arcturus, and a patch. A little baggie of tools, including what looks like a fake bullet, but you'd actually unscrew the front, and it is a small tool for adjusting your adjustable pre-cocking functionality on the sector gear. An instruction manual, which I strongly recommend reading, as this gun has a lot of particular functionality that is specific to it. And lastly, a couple of different stock options. The lower portion of the stock can be removed, and you can swap in just some more basic stock components. So if you just want a longer, regular looking stock, or kind of a almost stubby looking stock, you can do either of those. Let's start with the stock and move our way forward. The stock is fairly modular. It is specific to this style of airsoft gun, the C.A.T series. And I actually really like it. It's very unusual, and you can take the different stock lowers and kind of see how they would fit onto here. It's just basically a small pick rail that sits under here, a couple of screws and lugs that hold it on. So really, really simple design. So if you want to swap it to a more basic stock, then you can easily do that. But this one in particular is really meant for battery storage, or extra battery storage per se. You can put a battery in the buffer tube itself, but there isn't a whole lot of room because you've got a Deans connector and a small MOSFET in there. So you're going to be pretty much relegated to small 7.4 volt batteries. You might be able to cram an 11 one on there, but it's going to be a really, really thin one. It's going to be pretty tough to find one that will fit. So this lower compartment, you can fit a fairly decent sized brick battery in there. And to access that, there's a button on the side here. You press it, upper stock cap pops up, and the lower cap opens up. So you've got like a double hinged stock back. It's really unique. And the back of the stock is rubberized as well, so it'll stay on your shoulder pretty well. The plug and cable from your battery are going to run through this little trench here. And thankfully, I've got this buffer tube all the way in. There's no way you can cinch the wiring. So even if you're a little sloppy with it, you'll be just fine. The stock is of course adjustable. It's a little unusual with the box here for the battery storage in the bottom. You can grab either side and move it back and forth. Quite a few adjustable positions. And the stock itself also has QD points on either side. The stock and buffer tube fold to the left side. So if you want to press up here, put your thumb here and pull up on the buffer tube, it'll fold to the left side of the gun. It's held in place by a pretty minor locking mechanism, but you don't want to force it. You might actually damage something. So what you want to do is still press back up and then fold it back. And as you saw, there's a pretty generous cable connector here, so you don't have to be worried about cinching anything. Moving up to the receiver of the gun, it's a fairly streamlined receiver. There's no dust cover or anything like that. It's all been removed and kind of almost minimalized. It's an interesting looking, feeling receiver. And it is kind of a billet style. It's not your normal like rounded side, so it is a little bit different. The selector itself is ambi, as is just about everything else in the gun. The selector, bolt catch, and magazine catch are accessible from either side. Your pistol grip is a little bit different. It's angled a little bit less, so it's almost a little bit more vertical than your standard A2 pistol grip. The magazine well is a little bit different. I've seen a couple of options on the internet, but as this gun is fairly new, I haven't seen a whole lot of information out there. I know that you can get several different AR magazine wells, or even a 9mm magazine well, which unfortunately I'm not sure offhand which magazine it takes. Again, I couldn't find a whole lot of information out there. But you can remove the magazine well with a pin here and install different mag wells. I did some looking on the internet, and as of filming this video, I couldn't find any available to purchase. The charging handle is also very minimal. There's no tabs or anything. It's a straight pull, no locking bar or anything like that. So you can pull that back, and the fake bolt should should lock back. There we go. Since I disassembled it and did the internal review first, which I usually do, sometimes those don't always work as intended when I put these back together. So this one works, but it's a little picky now. So I can adjust my hop up. It's a little rotary wheel, and we'll take a look at that in the internal section more closely. And I can release the bolt from either side. It's got a nice audible click to it. The front and rear sight come detached from the gun, and it does come the appropriate Allen key to install them. They're both flip up, but they're not spring loaded or anything like that, rather simple. The rear sight is adjustable for both windage and elevation, and the front sight is adjustable for elevation. The rail system on this gun is not polymer, it is actually aluminum. It's pretty light, and it's very minimalistic too, kind of like the receiver. This gun has kind of a theme going to it of minimalism, but still pretty cool. It is M-LOK, so you can throw your favorite M-LOK accessories on there. What I found actually really funny was when I was shaking the gun to see if there's any rattle, the fake gas tube was what was rattling. So you may want to put I don't know, even glue it in place. There's a lot of different things you can do there to quiet that down. The barrel is really short. It's maybe 8 inches long tops. Has a 14mm negative thread on it, so if you want to install your tracer, your suppressors, anything like that, you can easily do that. All right, I have the gearbox opened up for the CAT-06 Versatile series here. I love the gearbox on this. It is really, really nice. I love the quality of it. We've got the motor here, the hop up and barrel, upper gearbox, and lower gearbox. I'm going to start with the hop up and barrel here. The hop up chamber is your pretty typical rotary style hop up. It has some detent for most of the barrel travel here, but once you get kind of past the halfway point, give or take, you run out of the little click detent there. So kind of nice that it's at least halfway there. And you do get a pretty heavy spring that sits on the front of the hop up, which will keep it nice and tight against the front of the gearbox shell. The inner barrel on this guy is about 200mm long. It's pretty short, even shorter than your typical MP5 model, which is about 230mm, give or take. So it's pretty short. It's a 6.02mm bore. The hop up bucking on this chamber is kind of your H style or two fin style, so you get 2 points of contact with the BB, giving you fairly decent groupings. Additionally, at maximum hop, with the hop up turned all the way on, I was able to lift 0.32 gram BBs, but that is as heavy as I could lift with this hop up chamber. You could definitely do heavier, but you'd need a new bucking or something along those lines. The motor included in the gun is Arcturus's 23 TPA motor, so it's a pretty nice balance between torque and speed. I think the rate of fire on 11.1 or even a 7.4 is pretty respectable, and you get a fair amount of torque, so if you want to upgrade the spring, you can definitely do that. And it does come with an O-type pinion. First section of the gearbox we're going to look at is the upper gearbox section. It's kind of interesting on the side here. It has the kind of notches you'd expect to see on a real AR bolt, so you can hit the forward assist and push it forward if needed. It doesn't really have an airsoft purpose or functionality, but I think it's kind of interesting. And you've got a ported cylinder here it's appropriate for actually a regular M4 length barrel, so you get a little bit of extra volume for this short barrel. Something I did notice too is the radiusing on the gearbox shell here really is almost non-existent. It is kind of beefed up in the places where you'd expect it to fail at some point, so I do expect it to last a little bit longer, but I would like to see some radiusing on these in the future. You do get the quick change, all steel bearing spring guide, which takes a second to get out there. So that is already a great part you'll never have to replace right there. And you do get a spring. It feels like an M120, M115, somewhere in there. It does have the red paint on the back end, which I've noticed Arcturus has been using lately to identify which spring your gun has, which I think is really, really nice to see. The compression components are pretty typical of Arcturus guns. Let's look at the nozzle. It is their CNC palm nozzle. It has a O-ring in there, so it should get a pretty decent seal. The tappet plate's actually pretty stiff, so that's interesting. Let's see, the air seal's dead on. It's perfect. You don't get any leak at all. You get great bounce back if you press it there. Piston head is polycarb and has bearings in there, which I'd come to expect at this point, which is really fantastic. Parts you won't have to swap out for a long time. The piston has your speed cuts in the sides and is an all steel tooth rack with the second to last tooth removed, which is fantastic. Cylinder head's pretty typical, just your regular old nylon plastic, one O-ring, rubber damper, and your Type 2 chrome cylinder. The lower gearbox is really, really unique. I love the fiber mesh, I guess you could call it. I'm not sure what the particular term is, but it's basically a mesh casing for the wiring as it goes into the stock for the most part. And this is cool. You don't really see this on airsoft guns much, or if at all, so this is a nice protective touch. You do have a really basic small MOSFET going to the back here, so you're safe to run an 11.1 volt on this gun, and I'd probably recommend it just for the fun factor. Big plus there. Basic Dean's connector, really great quality, so you can just plug your Dean's battery right in. It does have that adapter if you still got Tamiya plugs, but go do yourself a favor, get a Dean's plug. It's the way to go. On the bottom of the gearbox here, this latch, when pressed, will trip the anti-reversal latch. You want to do that before taking the upper section of the gearbox off of the lower so you don't damage anything. And of course, you've got your flat face trigger here, so that's really nice. And you can hear it does run off of a microswitch in there. So I love the tactile feel of a microswitch. You kind of get a break and a reset, just like a real firearm. Additionally, you have 8mm bushings here. The ones on the bevel are bearings, so you get a set of those, so 2 there, and then 4 solid bushings on your spur and sector. Something I really do appreciate on this gun, especially if the price point, is the shimming quality. The shimming is about as close to perfect as you can get, which I really like. It saves me work on having to shim it if I buy it. And as far as people that really don't open their guns up and just run them, this is going to last you a lot longer. Something like that, you know, it'll cost you maybe 40 bucks at a shop to get done, but it really does make a difference for longevity and durability. So big plus there. I'm holding the anti-reversal latch down so I can spin the gears here. And they spin pretty nicely, especially with grease on them already. So the sector gear, you can see it sits nicely at a pretty respectable distance from the spur gear. The spur gear has a little bit of wiggle to it, but not much at all. Honestly, I wouldn't even bother putting a shim in there. That's right about probably where you want it. And if you get it any tighter, you probably are just going to lock it up. The sector is a little bit tighter. It almost doesn't move at all, so it's pretty dang good. And then the bevel has a little bit of motion to it. You could probably put a shim on the bottom of that or the top, depending on which would end up being better. But I would be happy running that stock as is. A little bit of wiggle, but nothing to worry about. So the shimming is about as close to perfect as you can get on a stock gearbox. Very good. The gears on this guy are good quality steel gears, but something you're going to notice that's a bit different here is the sector gear. Now it does have a tappet delayer on there, which is great. It comes with that stock, but just a design difference. I noticed there aren't any holes up in here, which is interesting. That's to probably make room for this system. It is a mechanical pre-cocking system that you can adjust, essentially enable or disable. And this is a really cool system. This is brand new. I've not seen anything like this. You get a little tool here and you stick it in here, and you can do this with the gearbox in the lower receiver still. You just push it. It takes a little bit of force because this whole thing is spring loaded. And you just rotate it around the inside of the sector gear. So what you're doing is adjusting this little cam here, and it'll hit the cutoff lever at different times depending on where it is. On the right is a stock sector gear, and on the left is the Arcturus adjustable pre-cocking gear. And you can kind of see I've got them at about the right rotation, and they're about opposite each other where the cam is. So if I want, I can flip this cam about 180 degrees around and have your regular old stop when it should kind of functionality. But here, I'm thinking I'll get a little bit, or actually probably a lot of pre-cocking. Keep in mind, you can definitely tune this in a way that it will be weird and probably not ideal for the gearbox to run in a given fashion. So you probably want to do some trial and error and figure out where you want this cam to be and where you want your pre-cocking, or if you want to disable it altogether. Lastly, the lubrication on this gun is about average. I could probably put a little bit more on the gears, but I think it's probably dried up a little bit since the factory. And on the axles, it's pretty respectable. So I'd be happy running this, but I'd probably put a new coat of lubricant on here if you're really going to run it for a long time. Something you guys that hate anti-reversal latches will love is that because this little bar is here, it keeps the AR latch in place. You don't have to worry about it popping out or going anywhere. So this would actually be a fairly straightforward airsoft gun to work on if you are new to teching and you are just opening up your first gun. Overall, the versatile CAT series, or the CAT-06, which is this particular model, is a unique gun. It's growing on me since I got it. It looks a little unusual. The streamlining I like. The short rails are weird to me. I like, mid-length or longer rails, but I'm just picky, I guess. The stock is weird. I'll say that, but it's extremely functional. It works rather well. You've got a fair amount of battery room here, and you can swap it out for different configurations, which is almost unheard of for a lot of stock airsoft guns, or honestly stocks in general. So this gun has a lot of really awesome, unique, different functionality, which I like. It's just different. It takes some time to grow on you, and once you actually use it and take it apart and really understand it, I think you'll really actually come to appreciate it. It's a really solid gun. These run in the mid 200s, so for the money, I think you're getting a really solid airsoft gun. It's extremely light. It's very poppy. I like that really good snap it's got when it shoots. The rate of fire is solid. You get a Neo torque motor in here, you get a MOSFET, and you get a microswitch. So you've got more tactile functionality there, which I like. And the internals are tuned in such a way that this gun should last a long, long time before you have any issues. And as far as upgradability, it's fairly there. You can swap out all your main components, install different MOSFETs or anything along those lines that you want. Let's talk about the mechanical pre-cocking functionality. That's a new one to the airsoft game, and I'm kind of surprised they did that. I like the functionality. I don't usually use pre-cocking myself because I find it puts a little more wear on things. You're racking the piston back and leaving it cocked back before every shot, which is fine. If you want to do that, it does lead to a better follow-up shot, a faster follow-up shot, and it can be a lot of fun. I just don't like to put that much wear on my airsoft guns, but keep in mind, there is this little slot on the bottom here, so if you want to stick any tool in there, an Allen key, that little fake bullet it comes with, and decycle your gun after your game, you'll definitely want to do that to make sure this gun lasts as long as possible. But as far as long-term durability, I really don't see any issues with it in the long run. This thing's solid, it's tuned well, and it's got the right parts in it. So this thing is going to be rock solid for you. Something I've noticed with the airsoft industry, and it's got a trend going nowadays, is a lot of companies just don't innovate. They kind of do the same thing over and over and put a fresh coat of paint on it, but it's not really anything different. There's a few companies, Arcturus being one of them, that really does innovate. The mechanical pre-cocking feature, I think, is a huge innovation. You don't have to go spend a ton of money, $100+ on a nice MOSFET to get your pre-cocking functionality anymore. You can do it mechanically, and you can mechanically adjust it. To my knowledge, they're the only company that's ever done that. And I think it's fantastic how they're doing that. I think they should keep it up. The innovation on this gun and just how different it is, it's really, really neat. Thanks Nomad Airsoft for letting me check this out. Hope to see you guys out at Nighthawk Airsoft, where he has these for sale if you want to grab one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.